Do you remember waiting for summer vacation as a kid? Not the vacation itself, the waiting. Those last 2 weeks of school before it started. Every single lesson lasted approximately one geological era. The clock on the wall moved backwards. You were convinced, genuinely convinced, that Friday would never come. Now, think about last year. The whole year. Where did it go? You blinked and it was December again. You mentioned a movie to someone and called it new, and your friend looked at you and said it came out in 2019, 5 years ago. Same brain, completely different experience of time. And nobody warned you this was going to happen.
So what exactly is going on? Is your brain broken? Are you just busier now? Is this just what getting older feels like and there's nothing to be done about it? The answer is more fascinating and more useful than any of those options, because it turns out time perception isn't some passive thing that just happens to you. It's an active process. Your brain is running every second of your life, and it follows very specific rules. Rules you can actually use.
Let's start with the most important question. What is your brain actually measuring when it measures time? Here's the thing. Your brain has no dedicated clock, no single region that ticks away like a metronome. Instead, your brain measures time by counting events, by logging distinct moments, new things, changes in the environment. Every time something novel happens, your brain stamps it as a separate chapter in your memory. And this is the key insight. When you remember a period of time later, your brain doesn't play back a continuous recording. It counts the chapters. If there are many chapters, the period feels long. If there are few chapters, it feels short. Like a book. A book with a lot of scenes feels longer than a thin book with barely any scenes, even if they have the same number of pages. Now here's where childhood comes in, and it explains everything. When you were a kid, almost everything was new. Not just summer vacation, everything. A new word you'd never heard before, a joke format you hadn't seen coming, a food you'd never tried, the specific feeling of grass on your legs at recess. Your brain was stamping new chapters constantly. Every day was thick with events. That's why waiting for something as a child felt like forever. Your brain was logging so much between now and then, so many tiny novelties, so many small firsts, that the distance felt enormous. Now, think about a typical Tuesday for most adults. Wake up, coffee, commute or open laptop, meetings or tasks that look more or less like yesterday's meetings and tasks. Lunch, probably something you've had before, more tasks, dinner, sleep. Your brain scans all of this and finds very few chapters worth logging. The week compresses into almost nothing. And when you look back, it's just a blur. This isn't just a theory. In 2025, researchers at the Cambridge Center for Aging and Neuroscience ran one of the most elegant experiments on this question ever done. They took fMRI scans of 577 people aged 18 to 88 while they all watched the same 8-minute clip, a suspense scene from an Alfred Hitchcock show. Same clip, same room, same setup. The only difference was the age of the person in the scanner. Using a machine learning algorithm, they tracked when each person's brain switched between different states of activity, essentially when the brain decided that something new was happening. They called these neural cuts, and here's what they found. Younger brains made significantly more cuts per minute. Older brains lingered in each state much longer, making fewer transitions overall. In plain terms, young people's brains were watching a movie. Older people's brains were watching a slideshow, fewer frames per second. And when time contains fewer frames, it plays back faster. The researchers gave this a technical name, age-related neural dedifferentiation, which is a complicated way of saying as we age, our brain gets worse at telling the difference between one moment and the next. Events start to overlap. Faces, scenes, experiences blur together at the edges.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because this isn't a bug, it's a feature. Think about what a brain optimized for novelty would cost a species. Every day, our ancestors woke up in a world that was mostly the same as yesterday. Same forests, same tribes, same threats. If the brain kept treating every familiar tree as a brand new experience, logging it, processing it, storing it, the metabolic cost would be enormous, and for almost no survival benefit. So evolution built an efficiency filter. The brain learned to ignore the familiar. Once something is categorized as known, it gets compressed, shortcutted, processed on autopilot. The brain reserves its full attention, its chapter logging mode, for genuinely new information. This freed up enormous cognitive resources for actual problems: predators, food, social relationships, threats. The side effect of this beautifully efficient system is that familiar life compresses in memory. And when your whole life becomes familiar, when your routines, your commute, your job, your evenings all start to look the same, The whole thing compresses too. Not because you're old, because you're efficient.
There's another layer to this, and it involves a mathematician named Paul Janet, who proposed something in the 19th century that still holds up surprisingly well today. Janet noticed that we experience time proportionally, relative to how much life we've already lived. When you're 5 years old, 1 year is 20% of your entire existence. It's enormous. When you're 50, 1 year is 2%. It's a rounding error. This is why summer vacation at age 8 felt like an entire lifetime. Relative to how much time you'd experienced at that point, it genuinely was a huge proportion of your life. And it's why decades start to feel short as you accumulate more of them. Each new year is a smaller fraction of the total. It's not that time. Now let's put both of these things together because they interact in a way that matters. Your brain compresses familiar experiences, and as you age, more and more of your life becomes familiar. Routines build up, surprises become rarer, new experiences are harder to come by, not because life has nothing to offer, but because your brain has categorized so much of it already. Meanwhile, each new year is a proportionally smaller piece of the pie. The result is the classic adult experience. January arrives, you blink, and suddenly it's your birthday again, and you're having the exact same conversation you had last year about how fast the year went. But here's the genuinely good news, and this is the part most people miss. Because time perception is driven by novelty and chapter density, you can actually influence it. You can't stop aging, you can't make yourself 5 again, but you can change how many chapters your brain logs. A 2023 survey comparing young adults to retirees found that older people with predictable daily routines reported time rushing by nearly twice as fast as those who stayed socially engaged and kept learning new skills. The super-agers, the ones whose perception of time stayed sharpest, were the ones whose brains kept encountering new things. This doesn't mean you need to quit your job and move to another country. The research suggests that even small injections of novelty work. A different route to work, a conversation with someone you'd never normally talk to, a skill you've never tried, a place you've never been. Every genuinely new experience is a chapter your brain logs, and more chapters means more time. Not objectively more, but subjectively, which is the only kind of time that actually matters to the person living it.
There's one more thing worth sitting with. The fact that childhood felt so long wasn't an accident or an illusion. It felt long because it was full of firsts, full of newness, full of your brain firing on all cylinders just to make sense of a world it had never seen before. And the antidote isn't complicated. It's just rare, because routines are comfortable and novelty is effortful. But your brain is still there, still ready to log new chapters. It's still the same machine that made those summer vacations feel endless. You just have to give it something worth remembering.
If this changed the way you think about where all the time went, hit like and subscribe. Every week, we dig into the science behind the things your brain does without telling you. And I want to know, when did you first notice time starting to speed up? What age? What moment? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. See you in the next one.